The aurora dawn slipped through the atmosphere of Calthera Prime like a needle through silk. Jake Morrison pressed his hand against the observation window and watched as the alien world came into focus below. Cities sprawled across the landscape, their buildings rising in spirals and curves that seemed to defy human architectural logic. Everything shimmered with an odd pearlescent quality that made his eyes water if he stared too long. "Nervous?" Captain Lisa Grant asked from behind him. Jake turned and managed to smile. "Excited. This is what I've trained for my whole life. They've been avoiding us for 30 years, Lisa said, her tone careful. Something changed their minds. Keep your eyes open." The ship settled onto a landing platform that extended from the largest structure Jake had ever seen. It looked like a massive shell or perhaps a flower frozen mid-bloom. As the airlock cycled open, he took a deep breath and stepped out with the rest of the diplomatic team. The Calthera were waiting. Jake had seen photographs and video recordings, but nothing prepared him for seeing them in person. They stood upright, on 4 legs, their bodies covered in chitinous plating that reflected the light in rainbow patterns. Their heads were angular, dominated by large compound eyes that seemed to contain entire galaxies of reflected color. When they moved, it was with an insect-like grace that was both alien and strangely beautiful. But something was wrong. The Calthera delegation stood far back from the landing platform, maintaining at least 20 feet of distance. Their translator devices hung from their necks, and when the lead delegate spoke, his words came through flat and emotionless. "Welcome to Calthera Prime. I am Senior Delegate Voshitar. We have prepared accommodations for your stay." Jake stepped forward, following protocol. "Thank you for receiving us. We're honored to finally meet face to face." He noticed that as he moved closer, several of the Calthera shifted backward. It was subtle, but unmistakable. Dr. Henry Walsh, standing beside him, noticed it too. Jake felt his colleague's hand briefly touch his elbow in a warning gesture. The procession into the city was quiet and awkward. The Calthera led them through corridors that hummed with a low musical sound. The walls themselves seemed alive, pulsing with bioluminescent patterns. Jake wanted to ask about everything, but the stiff posture of their hosts discouraged conversation. Their accommodations were in a separate wing of the diplomatic complex. The rooms were beautiful, but clearly designed to keep the humans isolated. Jake sat on a chair that had been manufactured to human specifications and looked around at the space. Everything was brand new, created specifically for this visit. The Calthera had never hosted humans before. That evening, they gathered for the first formal meeting. The Calthera delegation sat on one side of a long table, the humans on the other. The distance between them seemed like a canyon. "We have reviewed your trade proposals," Voshitar said through his translator. "We are willing to discuss mineral rights in the outer territories." Lisa handled most of the talking. Jake's role was to observe, to read the room, to understand the cultural dynamics at play, and what he was reading troubled him. Every time a human moved, suddenly the Calthera flinched. When Lisa smiled while making a point, several of the aliens shifted uncomfortably in their seats. One younger Calthera, her plating a bright blue, color seemed unable to look directly at any of the humans. Her bioluminescent patterns flickered rapidly in what Jake suspected was distress. After an hour, Voshitar suggested they continue the next day. "Perhaps you would be more comfortable in your environmental suits?" he added. "The atmosphere here, while compatible, may cause you some discomfort over extended exposure." Jake knew that was nonsense. The atmospheric readings were well within human tolerances. Lisa knew it too, but she nodded politely. "We'll consider it. Thank you for your concern." When they returned to their quarters, the team gathered in Jake's room. "They're terrified of us," Dr. Walsh said bluntly. "Did you see how they reacted?" "Maybe they're just not used to other species," suggested Lieutenant Karen Brooks, their security officer. "No," Jake said slowly. "It's something specific about us. About how we look." Lisa paced the room. "They reached out to us. They initiated this contact after decades of radio silence. Why would they do that if they're afraid?" Jake thought about the young Calthera with the blue plating. She had volunteered for this assignment. He was sure of it. Something about her body language suggested she was different from the others, more curious despite her fear. Over the next 2 days, the pattern continued. The negotiations proceeded in careful, formal language. The Kelthera maintained their distance. Jake tried every friendly gesture he knew, every cultural bridge-building technique he had learned. Nothing worked. On the third evening, he was walking through the garden area of the complex when he saw her. The young Kelthera with blue plating stood near a fountain that sang with musical water. She was alone, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing in slow, contemplative rhythms. Jake approached slowly, making his footsteps audible. She turned, and her patterns flickered rapidly. Fear. "I'm sorry," Jake said. "I didn't mean to startle you. I'm Jake Morrison." Her translator crackled to life. "I know who you are. I am Zirash. I am assigned as backup liaison." "It's beautiful here," Jake said, gesturing to the garden. "Your people have created something amazing." Zirash's patterns shifted to something Jake couldn't interpret. "You think so?" "Of course. The way the buildings integrate with the landscape, the bioluminescent lighting, the musical architecture, it's incredible." There was a long pause. Zirash took a small step closer, though she was still many feet away. "May I ask you something?" she said finally. "A personal question?" "Sure," Jake replied, keeping his voice gentle. "Why did you volunteer for this mission? Surely you must find it difficult, being around us." Jake blinked in surprise. "Difficult? I've wanted to meet the Kelthera since I was a kid." "This is a dream come true." Zirash's patterns went chaotic. Her translator struggled to keep up with her words. "But you can look at us? You don't. We thought surely humans would also feel." She stopped, her patterns dimming. Jake realized she had revealed something she hadn't meant to. "Feel what?" he asked softly. But Zirash was already backing away. "I apologize, I have overstepped. Good evening, Ambassador Morrison." She disappeared into the complex before Jake could respond. He stood alone in the musical garden, his mind racing. The Kelthera weren't just nervous about first contact. They were specifically afraid of how they appeared to humans. But why would they assume humans felt the same way they did? Jake walked slowly back to his quarters. Tomorrow, he decided, he would request a private meeting with Zirash. Something told him she was the key to understanding this mystery. She had volunteered for this position, and that meant something. It meant courage. He just had to figure out how to help her be brave enough to tell the truth. Jake spent the morning preparing his request for a private meeting with Zirash. He knew it would be unusual, possibly even improper by Kelthera standards. But Captain Lisa agreed it was worth trying. "Something's blocking these negotiations," she said. "If you think this young liaison can help us understand what, then go for it." The request went through official channels. Jake half expected it to be denied. Instead, he received a response within an hour. Zirash had agreed to meet him that evening for what the Kelthera called a cultural exchange dinner. The dining area was in a dome made of translucent material that showed the alien sky above. 3 moons hung in the violet twilight, each one a different size and color. The room was beautiful but clearly designed to make both species comfortable. There were 2 tables placed about 15 feet apart. Zirash was already there when Jake arrived. Her blue plating seemed to glow in the dim light. Her bioluminescent patterns were moving slowly, which Jake had learned meant calmness or concentration. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me," Jake said, taking his seat at the human-sized table. "It is my duty," Zirash replied through her translator. "I am assigned to facilitate understanding between our peoples." "Is that the only reason you agreed?" Jake asked gently. The patterns on her body flickered. A long silence stretched between them. "No," she admitted finally. "I wanted to speak with you as well. Yesterday I said things I should not have said." "You didn't offend me," Jake assured her. "Actually, I think you were trying to tell me something important." Zirash shifted on her 4 legs. "It is difficult to explain." "Try," Jake said, "please. I want to understand." Food was brought by silent servers, mechanical devices that moved on wheels. Each table received dishes appropriate to its occupant. Jake's meal looked vaguely like pasta, though it was made from Kelthera grains. Zirash's plate contained what appeared to be luminescent fruits. They ate in silence for a while. Jake waited, knowing that pushing would only make her retreat again. "I have studied human culture," Zirash said suddenly. "Your music, your art, the way you tell stories. I find it fascinating." "Yeah? What's your favorite part?" "The songs," she said, and her patterns brightened. "The way you combine words and melody. We have nothing like it. Our communication includes harmonic elements, but not like human singing. It touches something in me I cannot name." Jake smiled. "I love music too. What kind do you like best?" "The sad songs," Zirash said. "The ones about longing and loss. They feel honest." They talked about music for a while, then about art and literature. Jake found himself genuinely enjoying the conversation. Zirash was intelligent and curious, and once she started talking about topics she loved, her fear seemed to fade. "Why did you volunteer for this position?" Jake asked eventually. "Your colleagues seem much older, more experienced." Zirash's patterns dimmed. "Because I am tired." "Tired of what?" "Of fear," she said quietly. "Of letting fear make all our decisions." Jake leaned forward. "Fear of what, Zirash?" She was quiet for so long that Jake thought she wouldn't answer. Her patterns cycled through colors he had never seen before, complex combinations that her emotional state was clearly complicated. "Fear of you," she whispered. "Of humans." Jake felt his chest tighten. "Because we're different?" "No," Zirash said. "Because you are not different enough." That made no sense to Jake. He opened his mouth to ask what she meant, but Zirash was already continuing. "Millions of years ago, my people were prey," she said. "We were small, weak, living in colonies underground. And there were predators. The smooth ones, we called them in our ancient language. They had soft skin, forward-facing eyes for tracking prey, mouths full of teeth. They hunted us relentlessly. They nearly drove us to extinction." Jake's breath caught. He was beginning to understand. "When we finally developed technology and weapons, we fought back," Zirash continued. "We drove them away from our territories. Eventually they died out completely, but the fear never left us. It is written into our deepest instincts. When we see something with soft skin and forward eyes and teeth that show when you smile, every part of our ancient brain screams danger." "You're saying humans look like the predators from your evolutionary past?" Jake said slowly. "Yes." Zirash's patterns pulsed rapidly. "When your ship first appeared in our sky, there was panic. When we saw images of your faces, many wanted to refuse all contact. But others, like me, knew we could not let ancient fear control us forever. We knew humans were not the smooth ones. You are intelligent, civilized, capable of art and philosophy. But knowing that in your mind and feeling it in your body are different things." Jake sat back in his chair. Everything made sense now. The distance, the nervousness, the suggestion of environmental suits that would hide human features. "I am sorry," Zirash said. "This must be hurtful to hear. You have been nothing but kind, and we have treated you with suspicion and fear." "No," Jake said firmly. "Don't apologize. You can't control instinctive fear any more than I can. What matters is that you're here, trying to overcome it." Zirash's pattern shifted to something softer. "You are generous." They sat in silence again, but this time it felt different. The truth was out in the open now. "Can I ask you something now?" Jake said. "Of course. Last night in the garden you started to say something. You said you thought humans would also feel something. What did you mean?" Zirash went very still. Her patterns dimmed until they were barely visible. "You do not have to answer," Jake added quickly. "No," Zirash said. "No, I will answer. It is only fair." She stood and walked a few steps closer to Jake's table, though she still maintained several feet of distance. Jake could see her trembling slightly. "We assumed," she said, her translator catching on the words, "that if we found humans frightening, then surely humans would find us equally disturbing. We thought the fear went both ways, that you would look at us and see monsters, insects, creatures from nightmares." Her patterns flickered wildly. Jake realized she was working up the courage to say something important. "So I must ask you," Zirash said, her voice barely audible through the translator. "Am I ugly to you?" The question hung in the air like a held breath. Jake saw how much courage it had taken her to ask it. She stood there, vulnerable and afraid, waiting for his answer. He thought about his response carefully. This was not a moment for diplomatic language or polite lies. This was a moment for truth. Jake stood and walked to the edge of his table as close as he could get without making Zirash uncomfortable. "No," he said clearly. "You're not ugly to me, not even a little bit." Zirash's patterns went completely dark for a moment, then blazed back to life in colors Jake had never seen. Her translator crackled with sounds it couldn't interpret. "When I first saw your people," Jake continued, "I didn't see monsters. I saw something I'd never imagined before. Something beautiful in a way I didn't have words for." Zirash made a sound without words. Jake recognized it somehow. She was crying. "I think we need to talk more," Jake said softly. "I think I need to explain something about humans, about how we see beauty." Zirash's patterns were pulsing so rapidly now that they seemed to blur together. She nodded, unable to speak. And Jake began to tell her about humanity's long, difficult journey toward understanding that different did not mean wrong. Jake pulled his chair a bit closer, still respecting the distance Zirash needed, and sat down. She had stopped making the crying sounds, but her bioluminescent patterns still pulsed in rapid, chaotic rhythms. He could see she was struggling to process his answer. "Can I tell you what I see when I look at you?" Jake asked gently. Zirash moved back to her table and sat, her 4 legs folding beneath her in a graceful motion. "Yes, please." "Your plating," Jake began, "the blue color with those rainbow reflections. It reminds me of opals. They're gemstones on Earth, precious and rare. People collect them and make jewelry from them because they're so beautiful. When you move and the light catches your plating differently, it's like watching water or fire, something alive and constantly changing." Zirash's pattern slowed slightly, shifting toward colors that seemed less agitated. "And your eyes," Jake continued. "Those compound structures that reflect everything around you. Do you know what they look like to me? Like galaxies. Like you're carrying entire universes in your gaze. Humans have always looked up at the stars and felt wonder. That's what I feel when I see your eyes. But we are so different from you," Zirash said. "Our bodies are movements. We have 4 legs. Our skin is hard. We are not soft and smooth like mammals." "Different doesn't mean ugly," Jake said firmly. "It just means different. Let me tell you something about human history. It's not a pretty story, but it's important." He paused, gathering his thoughts. This was delicate territory. For most of our history, humans have been afraid of other humans who look different from them. Different skin colors, different facial features, different body types. We created entire systems of hate and violence based on those differences. We enslaved each other. We committed terrible crimes against our own species because we couldn't see past the surface. Zirash's patterns had gone still, attentive. "It took us thousands of years to learn a simple truth," Jake continued. "Beauty exists in diversity. What makes something beautiful isn't that it looks like us. It's that it's unique. That it shows us new ways of being, new possibilities we never imagined." "But surely you still find some things more pleasing than others," Zirash said. "Aesthetics must still matter." "Of course," Jake agreed. "But I've learned to look beyond my first reaction. When I first saw images of the Kelthera, my brain did register different. But different isn't bad. It's just unexpected. And once you get past that initial surprise, you can start to really see." "What do you see?" Zirash asked quietly. Jake stood and walked to the edge of the space between their tables. He gestured toward her, asking permission with his body language. Zirash hesitated, then nodded. "I see grace," Jake said. "The way you move is like a dance. 4 legs working in perfect coordination, smooth and efficient. I see intelligence in the way you hold yourself, the way you tilt your head when you're thinking. I see courage in the fact that you're sitting here talking to me even though every instinct in your body is probably screaming at you to run." Zirash's pattern shifted to a warm, golden color. Her translator spoke, but her voice sounded different, softer. "No one has ever described me that way. And those aren't even the most important things," Jake continued. "You said you studied human music. You fell in love with our sad songs. That tells me you have depth, emotion, the ability to find beauty in melancholy. You volunteered for a position that terrified you because you believed it was right. That takes incredible strength of character." "I was afraid you would say yes," Zirash admitted. "When I asked if I was ugly to you, I was afraid you would be kind and lie, or worse, that you would tell the truth and confirm what I feared." "I am telling the truth," Jake said. "I promise you that. I believe you." Zirash's patterns brightened. "And that is what makes me cry. Not sadness. Relief. Joy. Feelings I did not expect to have today." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Jake could see Zirash was thinking deeply. You said humans feared other humans who looked different, she said finally. How did you overcome that? Slowly, Jake admitted. Painfully. Through education, through forced integration, through laws that protected the vulnerable, but most importantly, through personal connections. When you know someone as an individual, when you hear their stories and share their joys and sorrows, it becomes impossible to see them as other. They become simply another person. Is that what we are doing now? Zirash asked. Making a personal connection? I hope so, Jake said. I'd like to think we're becoming friends. Zirash's patterns went completely still for a moment, then exploded into the most brilliant display of colors Jake had seen yet. Friends, yes, I would like that very much. A soft chime sounded through the dome. Zirash's translator announced that their scheduled time was nearly over. Wait, she said suddenly. Before you go, I must tell you something. This conversation, our bio readings are monitored for health purposes. The medical staff will have seen my emotional responses. By tomorrow, people will know that something significant happened here. Jake felt a flutter of concern. Will that cause problems for you? I do not know, Zirash admitted. But I do not care. Some things are worth the risk. Should we tell our delegations what we discussed? Jake asked. Yes, Zirash said. They need to know the truth, all of it. The fear, the misconceptions, everything. Perhaps it will help. Or it might make things more complicated, Jake pointed out. Complicated is better than impossible, Zirash replied. Right now our people are trying to negotiate while walking on broken glass. If we name the real problem, at least we can begin to address it. Jake nodded slowly. She was right. Honesty, even uncomfortable honesty, was the only way forward. I should tell you something too, Jake said. Not all humans will react the way I do. Some of my own people have their own prejudices and fears. This won't be easy on either side. I know, Zirash said. But we have made a start. You and I, that is something. Jake stood to leave, and Zirash stood as well. For a moment, they simply looked at each other across the space between them. Thank you, Zirash said, for seeing me. The real me. Thank you for asking the question, Jake replied, for being brave enough to be vulnerable. As Jake walked back to his quarters, he felt the weight of what had just happened. He had not just had a conversation with an alien. He had made a genuine connection with another being, and in doing so, he had opened a door that might change everything between their species. When he entered his room, he found Captain Lisa waiting for him. The Calthera delegation has requested an emergency meeting, she said, her expression unreadable. Apparently, something significant happened during your dinner. They want to talk to us first thing tomorrow morning. Jake took a deep breath. I know, I can explain everything. Lisa studied his face. This is good news, isn't it? Whatever happened? Yeah, Jake said, and he couldn't help smiling. Yes, I think it might be the best news possible. He spent the rest of the evening preparing his report, choosing his words carefully. He wanted to honor Zirash's courage and honesty, while also helping his own people understand what they were really dealing with. This was not just about trade agreements and diplomatic protocols. This was about two species learning to see past their own fears and finding something beautiful in the unknown. Outside his window, the 3 moons of Calthera Prime rose higher into the violet sky. Somewhere in this alien city, Zirash was probably writing her own report, preparing to face her own people with the same truth. They were in this together now, and somehow that made everything seem possible. The morning meeting was unlike any diplomatic session Jake had ever attended. When the human delegation entered the conference room, they found the Calthera already there, but the seating arrangement had changed. The tables were closer together, only about 10 feet apart instead of 20. Senior Delegate Voshtar stood at the front of the room, his pattern cycling in what Jake now recognized as nervous determination. Ambassador Morrison, Voshtar said through his translator, Liaison Zirash has submitted a full report of your conversation yesterday evening. With her permission, we have shared it with our entire delegation. Jake glanced at Zirash, who stood to one side. Her blue plating seemed especially bright this morning. She met his gaze directly, something she had never done before. We owe you an apology, Voshtar continued. We have not been honest about our motivations for this meeting, or about the barriers we face. Zirash has helped us understand that honesty is the only path forward. Captain Lisa shot Jake a questioning look. He gave a small nod. Let them speak, we are afraid of you. Voshitar said bluntly. Not because of anything you have done, but because of what you look like. You resemble creatures from our ancient history, predators that nearly destroyed our species. This fear is not rational, but it is real. It has shaped our response to your presence in ways that are unfair and counterproductive. The room was completely silent. Jake could hear the musical hum of the building itself, a constant background tone. Yesterday, Liaison Zirash asked Ambassador Morrison a direct question about whether he found us aesthetically disturbing. Voshitar continued. His answer has given us much to consider. We had assumed our fear was mutual. We believed that humans would be equally repulsed by our appearance. This assumption was wrong. Dr. Henry Walsh leaned forward at the human table. Can I ask why you initiated contact if the fear was so strong? Because we are dying, said another Kelthera, an elder with deep purple plating. Jake had not heard him speak before. Not physically, but as a culture. Our fear has made us isolated. We have turned away from the galaxy because anything unknown triggers our ancient traumas. Our young people are restless, curious about the universe beyond our world. But we keep them here, keep them safe, keep them afraid. Zirash spoke up then. Some of us believe that we cannot grow unless we face our fears. When humans appeared in our space, peaceful and wanting to communicate, a few of us saw an opportunity. If we could learn to accept the species that looked most like our ancient enemies, perhaps we could finally be free of the past. So this whole thing is an experiment? Lieutenant Karen Brooks asked, her tone sharp. You invited us here to see if you could overcome your phobias? Yes, Voshitar said simply. And also because we genuinely need the trade agreements we have been discussing. Both things are true. Captain Lisa stood. I appreciate the honesty, truly. But we need to be honest too. Some of my crew members have their own concerns about your species. It's not fear exactly, but uncertainty. Discomfort with the unfamiliar. She looked at Jake, then continued. We humans have a complicated history with accepting those who are different from us. Ambassador Morrison can speak to that better than I can. Jake stood, feeling all eyes on him. Last night I told Zirash about humanity's struggles with diversity. How we've hurt each other over differences in appearance. How we've had to consciously, deliberately learn to see beauty in variety instead of threat in otherness. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I won't lie to you. Some humans will look at the Kelthera and feel uncomfortable. Not because you're frightening, but because you're different, and different requires mental adjustment. But I believe most humans, if given the chance, will see what I see. Something remarkable. Something worth knowing. Pretty words, said a young Kelthera Jake had not seen before. His plating was green and black. But how do we move from words to action? How do we overcome millions of years of instinct? Slowly, Jake said. With patience. With repeated positive experiences that teach our instincts new patterns. We need a structure, Zirash said. A program. Something gradual. For the next 2 hours, both delegations worked together to design what they called the Cultural Exchange Initiative. It would start small, shared meals like the one Jake and Zirash had experienced. Then joint work sessions on neutral topics. Eventually, visits to each other's cultural sites and cities. Dr. Walsh suggested bringing in psychologists from both species to help participants process their reactions. Zirash proposed artistic collaborations, remembering Jake's comments about music and beauty. The energy in the room had completely changed. People were talking across the divide now, their voices excited and engaged. Then came the announcement that would change everything. I propose something bold, Voshitar said. In 3 days, we will host a public cultural event, a display of Kelthera art and music. We will invite the human delegation to attend openly, without environmental suits or barriers. It will be voluntary for all Kelthera citizens. Those who are curious can come. Those who are afraid can stay away. That's risky, Captain Lisa said. What if something goes wrong? What if someone panics? Then we will deal with it, Voshitar replied. But we cannot hide forever. At some point, our peoples must meet face to face. The proposal was accepted. For the next 3 days, both sides prepared. Jake worked with Zirash and a small team to create informational materials for the Kelthera public. They included photos of humans in everyday situations, not just formal diplomatic poses. Humans laughing, working, caring for children, creating art. Zirash had an idea that surprised everyone. Show them humans being afraid, she said. Show them that you also have fears and vulnerabilities. I think my people believe humans are either dangerous or perfect. They need to see that you are neither. You are just people. So they added images and videos of humans facing their own fears, rock climbers clinging to cliff faces, people comforting each other during difficult times, footage of human peace negotiations after wars, showing the hard work of reconciliation. The night before the cultural event, Jake could not sleep. He walked through the human quarters and found several of his colleagues also awake. "Nervous?" Karen asked. She was sitting in the common area, cleaning her equipment out of habit rather than necessity. "Terrified," Jake admitted. "What if we make things worse? Or what if we make things better?" Dr. Walsh said from the doorway. "That's equally possible." The day of the event arrived with clear skies and gentle winds. The venue was an open-air amphitheater in the center of the city, a space usually reserved for major Kelthera celebrations. The human delegation arrived early. Jake stood at the entrance and watched as Kelthera citizens began to appear. Most stayed far back, clustering in groups near the exits, but some came closer. Young ones mostly, their patterns bright with curiosity. Then he saw a child, small enough that its plating had not yet fully hardened into adult colors. It broke away from its parent and scurried toward Jake, moving with the quick, darting motion of the very young. The parent cried out in alarm. Several Kelthera nearby tensed. Jake did not move. He simply knelt down slowly, making himself smaller, less threatening. The child stopped a few feet away, its compound eyes reflecting Jake's image 1,000 times over. "Hello," Jake said softly, knowing the child probably could not understand but hoping his tone would convey gentleness. The child reached out one small leg, not quite touching Jake, just testing the space between them. The parent arrived, patterns flashing in distress. But before anyone could react, Zirash was there. She spoke in rapid Kelthera, then her translator caught up. "Look," she was saying. "Look at how gentle he is. How careful. This is what I tried to tell you all. They are not the smooth ones. They are something new." The parent looked at Jake, at their child, then at Zirash. Slowly, the frantic patterns calmed. Jake smiled at the child, keeping his lips closed so his teeth would not show. Then he stood carefully and backed away, giving the family space. Someone in the crowd had been recording the moment. By evening, Jake learned, the footage would be seen by millions of Kelthera across their world. The cultural event proceeded with growing confidence. Kelthera musicians performed on instruments that created harmonics humans could barely hear. Human delegates responded with recordings of Earth music, watching in fascination as the Kelthera patterns pulsed in rhythm. By the end of the day, the distance between species had not disappeared. But it had shrunk, and that was enough for now. 3 weeks after the cultural event, Jake stood in the diplomatic complex watching the final preparations for the signing ceremony. The trade agreements had been finalized, but everyone knew the real achievement went far deeper than mineral rights and exchange rates. The ceremony would take place in the same amphitheater where the cultural event had been held. This time, the Kelthera Organizing Committee had insisted on a different arrangement. The signing table would be in the center, with both delegations seated around it in a circle rather than on opposite sides. "It is symbolic," Boshatar explained. "We are not two sides facing each other. We are one group, facing the future together." Captain Lisa approved the change. She had spent the past 3 weeks watching the relationship between the two species evolve in ways she had never imagined possible. Daily work sessions had become collaborative and even friendly. The distance between humans and Kelthera had shrunk from 20 feet to 5, then to casual working distance. Not everyone was comfortable with the changes. On both sides, there were those who remained skeptical or afraid. But the momentum had shifted. Jake was in his quarters finalizing his own report when Zirash requested a private meeting. They had spoken many times since their first dinner, but always in professional contexts. This felt different. She met him in the musical garden where they had first truly connected. The sun was setting and her blue plating caught the orange light in spectacular ways. "I have news," she said. "The Kelthera Council has offered me a new position. Permanent ambassador to humanity." Jake felt a surge of happiness. "That's incredible, congratulations." "I have not accepted yet," Zirash said. Her patterns were cycling through complex colors. It would mean leaving Kelthera Prime, traveling to Earth, living among humans for extended periods. "I am not certain I am ready." "No one would blame you for being hesitant," Jake said. "It's a huge commitment." "Is it true what I have heard?" Zirash asked. That you have volunteered to remain here as a reciprocal ambassador? Jake nodded. If the council approves it, I want to help continue what we started. There's so much more work to do. That is what I think also, Siraj said, which is why I wanted to ask your advice. Should I accept the position? Jake walked closer to her, within arm's reach now. A distance that would have been unthinkable a month ago. I can't make that decision for you, but I can tell you what I think you're capable of. Please, Siraj said. You're one of the bravest people I have ever met, Jake said. You asked a question that terrified you because you knew the answer mattered. You shared your fears with me, with your own people, with everyone. You did not let ancient instinct control your choices. If anyone can bridge the gap between our species, it is you. Zirash's pattern shifted to that warm golden color that Jake had learned meant happiness. You have too much faith in me. I have exactly the right amount of faith in you, Jake replied. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the sun disappear below the horizon. The garden's bioluminescent plants began to glow, creating patterns of light that danced across the pathways. I will accept the position, Ziraj said finally, but only if you promise something. What's that? Promise that when I feel afraid, when my instincts tell me to run from the soft-skinned creatures with forward-facing eyes, you will remind me of this conversation. You will remind me that fear does not have to be the end of the story. I promise, Jake said, and you have to promise me the same thing. Because I get scared too, scared of failure, of making things worse, of not being enough. You are enough, Ziraj said firmly. You are exactly enough. The signing ceremony the next day was attended by thousands of Kelthera and broadcast across both human and Kelthera space. The agreements were signed with appropriate formality, but the moment that captured everyone's attention came afterward. Volshatar stood to make an announcement. In recognition of their exceptional service to both our peoples, we are honored to announce 2 new positions. Ambassador Jake Morrison will remain on Kelthera Prime as the human liaison. Ambassador Ziraj will serve as our representative to humanity, traveling to Earth within the next lunar cycle. The crowd of Kelthera responded with a cascade of bioluminescent patterns, their equivalent of applause. The human delegation stood and clapped, the sharp sound startling some of the nearer Kelthera but no longer triggering fear. After the ceremony, there was a reception. Jake watched as Kelthera and humans mingled, still maintaining some distance but talking, laughing, sharing food and stories. A group of young Kelthera had surrounded Dr. Walsh, peppering him with questions about Earth biology. Lieutenant Karen was demonstrating a human dance move to a fascinated audience, her movements slow and exaggerated so the Kelthera could follow along. Ziraj appeared beside Jake, and together they watched the scene. Do you remember what you asked me that first night? Jake said, in our dinner meeting? Of course, Ziraj replied. I asked if I was ugly to you. If someone asked me that question today, I would not just say no, Jake said. I would ask them a different question in return. What question? I would ask, why does it matter what I think? Beauty is not something one person grants to another. It is something we discover in ourselves and in each other when we are brave enough to really look. Zirash's patterns flared brightly. That is a very human answer. Very philosophical. Maybe, Jake said. But I learned it from you. You were the one who was brave enough to ask the question. That takes more courage than answering. Over the following weeks, the Cultural Exchange Initiative began in earnest. The first group of Kelthera students arrived on the Aurora Dawn for a month-long program. They were nervous, their patterns flickering with anxiety, but also with excitement. Jake was there when they boarded, along with Ziraj. One of the students, a young male with bright orange plating, approached them hesitantly. Ambassador Morrison? He said through his translator. May I ask you something? Of course, Jake said. What do you think of us, truly? Jake smiled, and this time he did not hide his teeth. The student flinched slightly but held his ground. I think you are remarkable, Jake said. I think your people have created one of the most beautiful civilizations I have ever seen. I think your art moves me in ways I cannot fully explain. I think your courage in reaching out to us despite your fears shows incredible strength. And I think you personally are brave for being here today. The student's pattern shifted through several colors. Thank you. That means more than you know. As the ship prepared to depart, carrying Ziraj and the students toward Earth, Jake stood on the landing platform and watched it rise into the violet sky. Captain Lisa stood beside him. "You did good work here, Jake," she said. "You changed things." "We all did," Jake replied. "And this is just the beginning. Are you sure you want to stay? It is going to be months, maybe years of difficult work. Teaching, translating, dealing with setbacks and misunderstandings." "I am sure," Jake said. "Someone asked me once if she was ugly. The answer I gave changed both our lives. I want to keep giving that answer, in as many ways as possible to as many people as need to hear it." The Aurora Dawn disappeared into the atmosphere, leaving a trail of light behind it. Somewhere on that ship, Zirash was probably feeling afraid, probably wondering if she had made the right choice. But Jake knew she would be okay. She had already done the hardest part. She had asked the question that changed everything. In the months that followed, Jake became a familiar sight in the cities of Kelthera Prime. He walked through markets where Kelthera vendors had once flinched at his approach, but now greeted him by name. He attended schools where young Kelthera asked him endless questions about Earth and humanity. He worked with artists, scientists, educators, and ordinary citizens who were slowly, carefully learning to see past their ancient fears. It was not always easy. There were setbacks and misunderstandings. There were days when the distance between species seemed as vast as ever. But there were also moments of connection, of shared laughter, of mutual understanding that made everything worthwhile. And whenever Jake felt discouraged, he remembered that evening in the dome when Zirash had asked her question with such vulnerable courage. He remembered his answer and her tears and the way everything had changed in that moment. Beauty, he had learned, was not about appearance. It was about recognition. It was about seeing another being truly and completely, and choosing to value what you found there. That was the gift humanity could offer the galaxy. Not technology or military might or diplomatic skill, though those things mattered. The real gift was the hard-won lesson of Earth's own painful history. That difference was not something to fear, but something to celebrate. That the unknown could become the familiar, and the familiar could become beloved. One evening, Jake received a transmission from Earth. Zirash appeared on the screen, her patterns bright and confident. "I spoke to a group of human students today," she said. "At the end of my presentation, one of them asked me a question. She wanted to know if I thought humans were beautiful." "What did you tell her?" Jake asked. "I told her what you taught me," Zirash said. "I told her that beauty is not something we see with our eyes alone. It is something we discover with our hearts. And yes, I find humans beautiful, not despite your differences,